My husband was killed amongst the 60. It was a major tragedy for not only us as a family, but for the country.
I would like to know your first experience when you left the country.
I happened to be a professional journalist once upon a time. I myself was a very small child when my grandfather came. Two were killed by Graziani during the Italian wars. You know, my father said, no, I am not leaving my children behind. I want my children to become thoroughly Ethiopian.
Why did they imprison you?
You can't ask that question. My mother owned the biggest library a woman had in East Africa. I was working at the Herald and then I ended up marrying the editor.
Baba Mokria that introduced Ethiopia.
Yes, indeed. It used to be called Mokriatar, designated to any country. He was always an ambassador for his country.
Good afternoon. This is your Pan-African show called Afreeqa and your host Seifu. Today I have yet come with another amazing guest for you. We have actually moved to another location. We're in Ropak at her house. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
If you would please introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Sophia Yilma. Sophia Yilma Deresa.
Just to give everybody an insight, Wezero Sophia happens to be my aunt. And I've decided to actually delve into family because we have such beautiful history. So I came to Auntie Sophie to actually talk about our family, basically, I can put it. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, and then if you could also at the same time tell us a little bit about your family.
About myself?
Yes.
I happen to be a professional journalist once upon a time. At this moment in time, I'm 82 years old, so I've been retired for some time.
Okay.
Otherwise, I was educated in Europe as a journalist, and I worked for the Ethiopian Herald for many years. I worked in Ethiopian radio, and not very much on Ethiopian television, but I also appeared there once. The interviewer, by the way, is my niece, and God only knows why she invited me.
I wanted to know history.
But I'm here.
So, okay, let's start with your grandfather, who happens to be my great-grandfather.
Yes.
So, if you could tell us a little bit about him, and then we could go into Wezero Elizabeth, and then who she married, and then you came.
Unfortunately, I myself was a very small child when my grandfather came from Great Britain, so I didn't get to know him very well. But he was a grand old man, that I can remember very well. And I don't know what I could tell you about him. I think many people in Ethiopia have already had a lot of history about our grandfather, Hakim Workana. He also was known as Dr. Martin.
Yeah, Charles Martin.
Charles Martin, yes.
So he gave birth to your mom.
Not only my mom, but he also gave birth to 13 children from our one and only grandmother, Kazalawark Tulu. And
which, by the way, I was named after.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So out of the 5 girls was Elizabeth Workana.
Exactly. One of them
was your mom.
Number 4, as a matter of fact. 2 boys and then 2 girls. The first 2 girls were my mother and Esther Workana. Yes.
So Mama Elsie, as we call her, got married. And she got married to Gashil Madarasa.
Yes, she did.
And then gave birth to 5 children.
No, as a matter of fact, there were 6.
Okay.
We are 4 girls and 2 boys.
Okay.
And my mother married, as you said, Yilma Deresa, who was a long-standing Ethiopian official who served nearly 40 years in the Ministry of Finance, as the Minister of Finance. But that's not really the most interesting thing about my father. My father was, by any calculations, a very intelligent and very knowledgeable person. And I think people remember him more for that.
Delegation will accordingly press for the establishment of effective and substantial international economic instruments and agencies for the expansion of not only technical assistance, but for the financing and promoting of the basic development of the underdeveloped areas of the world.
You know, I don't remember him.
Don't you?
I mean, I remember him physically, but like in conversations, I was very young.
Yes.
So if there was one thing you would think we as family members should know about him, or not even just me as a family member, but as an Ethiopian, you know, like you said, I'm sure there's a lot that has been said about him, but there are certain things that are very personal to you and to the family. Maybe nobody knows, or maybe that it left an imprint on you as a child. That could actually be even a better...
Well, you know, that's a very loaded question.
I know.
The thing is, my father was a very, very, very interesting person. Much more about him as a person than as an official.
Exactly.
He was a highly intelligent person. He was interested in a variety of things. One of them being Egyptology.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and his favorite character in Egyptology was Tutankhamun, who died very early in his life. He was one of the Egyptian pharaohs.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that I know about him was he was an ambassador, right? He was an ambassador for Ethiopia, and I guess the family moved to the States. So
Exactly.
So tell me your experience there. Was it the first time you had traveled? If it was the first time, because I would like to know your first experience when you left the country.
We were very young, and 8 and 9. My youngest sister was only 2.
Oh.
Yes, her name is Sophia Yilma. My eldest sister is Yilma. Then come I, and then comes Hannah, and then come 2 boys.
2 boys.
Binyam and Fanuel. And my father's ambassadorship was not too long. We lived in the United States for about 8 years.
Okay.
And
you went to school there? Or?
We obviously went to school there. And then my father decided that when we came back, many people wouldn't have done that, but you know, my father said, no, I am not leaving my children behind. I do not want them to grow up as Americans. I want my children to become thoroughly Ethiopian. That's one of my father's great characters. He loved his country very, very much. And he was a true ambassador in the sense that he didn't have to be designated to any country. He was always an ambassador for his country.
Beautiful. So then you studied journalism?
Yes, I did.
So I'm going to be skipping. Just so we can get some, good stories, good perspectives, exactly. So you became a journalist, you studied abroad and you came back home.
Yes.
And then you became, what was it that you became? You became a journalist at the
actually,
Herald?
I left my profession. Well, it's somewhat related, but I went into public relations.
But before you did the public relations, you were somewhere else because you met your husband at the other job, correct? At the Herald?
Yes. I was working at the Herald and then I ended up marrying the editor.
Oops. So you couldn't stay there.
So I could stay there.
But then we have to stay there because one of the most interesting about that to me was you were the only woman that was actually working at that time, and this was in the 60s. So, me being a woman, I would like to ask, how was that atmosphere, getting that job, starting from getting the job? How did you end up landing that job, being the only woman in that atmosphere?
There were, as you said, we were few and far apart, but what makes me a little different from the many women who are professionals is that I joined journalism.
Okay.
And I worked there. At some point I was promoted to women's page editor,
Okay.
and I produced a full page every week on the experiences of Ethiopian women, both poor, middle of the way, and higher powered families, and so on. And I was very surprised actually when it came out, and it was popular.
Yeah.
And it had lots of photographs of women that were outstanding in their own way.
Okay.
And they were not necessarily professional people. They could have been just
Homemakers,
commoners,
yeah.
but they were genuinely interesting.
Right.
And that was a good thing.
Yeah. I wish we had something like that now, because I feel like it's an empowerment to women that are not in that world. To see, front page women, especially in the 60s, I think would have, it does empower a lot of women. So after that, you married.
Yes.
Or while you were there, you married. So tell me a little bit about you and your husband, how you met, obviously on the job, but then, how that, just a little,
Yes. Well, like you said, it was that we met on the job, and obviously hit it off. So we got married, and we had a beautiful little boy, almost immediately. And then, unfortunately, that part of the story is not as comfortable for me, or for many Ethiopians for that matter. My husband was killed amongst the 60. And it was a major tragedy for not only us as a family, but for the country.
Yeah.
So that was a hard-hitting thing. And actually, it not only destroyed my marriage and so on, but it also destroyed the coming of Derg. Actually destroyed our family as a whole, including my father, who became a prisoner for nearly 8 years.
Yes.
And then my mother and I were imprisoned.
Really?
Yes.
And why did they imprison you?
Well, you can't ask that question in Ethiopia
I'm
because it doesn't make any sense. Actually, we were an official family, meaning my father was an official, and therefore anything that was connected to him was something that the immediate government of the time saw as enemy.
So you and Mama Elsie were taken to prison?
Yes.
So now you're gonna, now that you brought it up, we're gonna have to hear a little bit about the prison time. How long were you there? Because I know from what I have heard that you met quite a lot of women actually in prison.
Prison is not
a
good experience. No. It can't be.
No, it cannot.
Because it takes away everything in your life. You're incarcerated, so to speak. And so that's the major downside of it. So we were in prison. People like my family, there were something like 58 of us. I think at the end of the day, we ended up being in the 90s. The number became 90s and so on, yes. And we were in one concentrated huge room, which was built during the Second World War by the Italians when they were here. And it had the flooring was slab stone, and we ended up sleeping on that.
On those stones.
You can imagine coming from our small, comfortable homes to have to sleep on and also one space was for 3 people. So that I slept with 2 other people on the same little slab. Wow. That itself is very, very, very discomforting. But more than anything else, like I said, the fact that they had taken away from us so much from our life was a really bad thing that happened to us.
Very tragic.
Yeah.
Very tragic.
Yeah. More tragic for me, my mother came to prison only a few days after. And as a matter of fact, she had been assigned to a different prison, and I had to ask the authorities to bring her to the prison where I was, because my father was in one prison, my mother was in another, and I was in another. And it was your grandmother, actually, who looked after us throughout our prison life. And I shall never forget that.
My grandmother being Granny?
Yes. Oh. Your grandmother, Susie Orkana, was the person who looked after the 3 of us the whole time that we were in prison. My mother and I were not in prison for too long. It was only 7 months. Many of our colleagues ended up nearly 8 years. So we were fortunate. And to add to our tragedy, the prison authorities decided that they would bring in thieves and murderers and all kinds of criminals to the same room. And many nights these people would fight with each other, and blood would be all over the place, and then the prison guards would come and beat them some more, and all that was tremendously traumatic. Tremendously traumatic. I mean, leave aside people like ourselves who have been sheltered all our lives, almost anybody would have gone crazy.
When you were let out, who ended up, so Auntie Sarah there with you?
Yes, indeed she was. Sarah Sahli. Yes, she was.
Did she stay longer, or did she come out?
No, actually she was very fortunate. She came out, she was one of the first to be released.
Okay.
Left the prison after 3 months. Yeah.
Okay. So then you guys left the prison. And of course, absolutely right now, your lives are like really in shambles because everything is going the wrong way for our family, I should say. But then you came out of prison, and then what ended up happening after that? What did you do? What could you have done? I mean,
well, I was still working for Ethiopian Telecommunications when I was imprisoned. Okay. They came to my office to pick me up. As a matter of fact, you would be surprised to know that there were 11 cadres.
To pick you little up?
To pick little me up. And then there you go. We kept on going to the children of different officials, picking them up. The men were sent to other prisons, and then we were sent to the women's prison. And the thing about being imprisoned, it's not only personal, it destroys the whole family. My brothers and sisters left the country almost never to come back. Their lives were shattered because everything was taken care of by my father, and that obviously ended when he was imprisoned. And at the end of the day also, my father died in prison. He was deadly ill. He had cancer, and they didn't see it right to take him to the hospital in time for him at least to be medicated at some point.
Exactly.
And this nearly killed my mother. She's a very delicate person, as you well know.
Absolutely.
And she, when we were in prison, she had such a bad time that she ended up being, 39 kilos, which is astronomical. It's not human, Your grandmother was totally shattered when she first saw her. We weren't able to see our families, by the way, the whole time that we were there.
So she just passes whatever she brings
exactly.
to you?
She just brings us food and clean clothing. But we never actually got to see our family. As a matter of fact, my little boy, I saw him because somebody cheated and brought him to the Riders Club. And the Riders Club is just behind. I was hospitalized. While in prison, I got very sick and I was hospitalized. And from that hospital, I could see in the garden, it was your mother who brought him, so I could see him through the window. But then.
So how old was Yared?
4.
He was 4. Wow. Must have been hard. Because he was young.
Yeah, but he recognized very little at the time. As a matter of fact, he was very much affected by our tragedies long after when he was much older,
When he once understood what happened.
When he understood. Well, he understood from the beginning, but the thing is, it affected him. The older he got, he felt punished, And throughout his life, I lost my son some years back, he never really got over that.
He didn't. Yared, by the way, was my brother.
Yes. Yes.
So to take you back, my mother, Auntie Sophie, my aunt, who was Rahel, actually had kids around the same time.
Yes.
So the first child was Mama Rahel's, which was Naomi.
Yes.
Naomi Hiskel. And then the second was Yared.
Yes.
And then the third was me. And our age was, me and Yared were 2 weeks apart. Me and Naomi were a month apart. Yared and Naomi were 2 weeks apart.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was actually absolutely beautiful to grow in this family because you had kids your own age.
Exactly.
So now let's go to that side, that part of the story, that part of your life. So as I remember, Mom got married first, right? She was the first one to get married.
From our group, yes.
Yeah, so let's start from that and then we'll gradually come to you. Tell me about the experience of the first wedding in the family, because I think she was the first one that got married.
There is a very sad thing there. Yours truly was not at your mother's wedding because I had gone to school in Europe, and I was the only one not in attendance. And never left me. I always regretted that.
Okay, so we'll make that short and then we'll come to your side. So you came from college, you met Gash Taging, you got married and had a baby boy.
Yes.
And then unfortunately, you know, the tragedy happened. And then, you know, as life goes on, we're still in the telecommunication, correct? After you lost Taging?
Yes. The thing is, you know, when I came out of prison, the telecommunications manager said, lady, you are a prisoner, I can't just take you back. So you better write me a letter and say that it is, you know, okay for me to take you back. I wrote the letter myself and took it back to the Derg authorities. And they said, okay, that's you can go back. And then I took this to my general manager. And that's how I went back to work.
Okay.
But the thing is, really, we should talk about the many beautiful people in my family.
Yes.
We were 6, and they were really very accomplished girls. My older sister was always hardworking. Her name is Sophia Yilma, and she was always very active, very knowledgeable, very outgoing person. Mm-hmm. And she had 3 strapping boys and 1 girl, and they turned out to be great kids. One of them is a professor at NYU, yes, New York State University, and he has attained tenure, which is very special, as you probably know. And
wait, but we have to mention his name.
That's Yamana Jigu.
Yes, Yamani.
Yes.
We all love Yamani.
He's a very, very, not only very, very nice young man, but he's also a very hardworking and very professional.
Absolutely. Yes. He also makes amazing movies.
Yes, he does.
One of the movies that he made was actually our Emperor Haile Selassie's life.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had another sister who, well, I have 2 other sisters,
exactly.
Meaning, and both of them were extremely successful young ladies. Hannah was an amazing individual. We lost her a few years back, but she was into high politics and she fought the Derg tooth and nail. She even went into the Sudan desert to set up a radio station to broadcast all over Ethiopia. To bring out people against the Derg. She worked with Dereje Deresa, who happens to be also my first cousin and her protege throughout her life. And they worked their hearts out into their bones were flushed to get this country back on its feet. And I think they came a long way, you know. Hannah was, again, an exceptionally intelligent young girl. Then I had our baby sister. She came along and she became outstanding. Her name is Sophia Yilma, and she worked for the New York Times. What black girl and a woman gets into that, you know, place? The competition is deadly.
Exactly.
Yes, and she was also listed as amongst one of the most successful young person to succeed list of America.
Okay. Wow.
Which makes her special.
Well, when you look at where you came from, I mean, I think it's expected that you get, you know, to a certain degree.
Yeah. And by the way, I forgot to mention that my mother is a highly intelligent person, and one of her gifts in life was that she was a great reader.
Yes.
I think my mother owned the biggest library a woman had in East Africa, you know?
Wow.
And she read everything. She read autobiographies, history, novels. And she belonged to a book society which would send her a book every month.
Wow, that's lovely.
Yes.
That's beautiful. So now let's go to your aunts. Aunties in a sense where let's go to, I mean, you did talk about my grandmother, Susie Warkana, and then you also mentioned Mama Stair. And then, I mean, you did say they had 13 children, our great-grandfather or grandparents. And I unfortunately didn't meet all of them, you know.
Oh, neither did we. Many of them, two were killed by Graziani during the Italian War. The Italian fascists, yes.
Right?
Yes. And they were killed by Graziani, the two boys. And then came my mother and Mama Stair.
Okay.
And then down the line. But, you know, to go back to my father's family, I was going to tell you, the outstanding achievers of the family also came from my father's sister, Yeshimnavi Teresa.
Yes.
And she had 4 strapping boys who were highly successful individuals. Solomon Deresa is well known.
Yes.
He's an author, a writer, and a philosopher. Brahana Deresa was a diplomat and later became Mayor of Addis Ababa.
Mayor of Addis Ababa, exactly.
Yes. And Jonas, again, is an outstanding reader who's reputed, by the way. An American journalist interviewed him. He's supposed to have read something like 3,000 books in his life.
Wow.
Which is unbelievable. And he was interviewed in America for that.
I especially want to thank Chairman Dimali for his invitation to appear. Ethiopians have a deep regard for the United States, not just because of its role in relieving famine, but because it stands as the finest example of the kind of society we wish to emulate.
And he also addressed the Congress during the Derg for Ethiopia's liberation. And Dereje was an outstanding politician who fought tooth and nail with Derg, but unfortunately he was caught by cancer and died abroad before he could make it back to Ethiopia. Home. But he was very much admired by many people.
Okay, so those are the 4 boys. She didn't have girls, she just had 4 boys.
No, she didn't.
Okay. So we come back to
the Warkanas, yes.
So tell me about your aunt.
Which one?
I mean, you had several. I don't want to pick names. You pick the names. You pick who you want to talk about.
I told you a little bit about my mother.
Yes, you did.
And Esther Warkana is another extraordinary individual. You know, when times were hard, she was one of the first women to take a professional job, and she went and worked. No, first, actually, both Leah Warkana, who was the last of the daughters, they taught at Egemenin.
Okay.
They were teachers.
I didn't know that.
Yes, they were. And they both taught English and, what was it? Social history and so on and so forth, which was an excellent thing. Both Leah Warkana and Esther Warkana were teachers there. And then both Leah and Esther Warkana worked for the bank. And they worked in the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia. and Mama Esther's husband stopped working. Yes, she took on a job and worked there for very many years and supported the family. She was very outstanding in that way. And you may not know, or you may know, that when they were young, they were at school in England, in a place called Shipley. And that's one thing about Esther and Leah Workner. Susie Workner got married to Mokre Oldeselase, who was a famous agronome. He was educated in Italy, and he was extremely knowledgeable about plant life and animal life and so on. And he spent many years of his life in the Ministry of Agriculture.
You know what I heard, and this I heard from my sister when they, quite a while ago, they had gotten to soy milk. And her husband was trying to learn about soybean, and he found out that it was actually Baba Mokrea that introduced Ethiopia to soybean.
Indeed. It used to be called Mokreatar instead of... Yeah.
So brilliant. So Baba Mokrea is my grandfather, proud to say.
Mama Esther's husband was also a diplomat.
Yes.
And he was an ambassador to Liberia for a few years. And
then Baba Afreeqa and Mama Esther, which my audience has seen Hirut Bafukado on my show. They are her parents.
yes.
So we've come like full circle now.
Yeah.
So before we close off, I want to give you your last words. What you want to say, the young generation that's coming up about their country, about themselves.
That's a good question, Kazu. The thing is, you know, the whole purpose of this interview, really, the only reason I said yes to you is not really because
You're related to me?
Yeah, that I'm related to you. But the thing is, we want our experiences, which were in many ways great, you know, young people to hear and you know, take a few things from me, a few things from there, from what we just said, and oh, maybe it's inspiring. I'm hoping so.
Absolutely. That's my goal too. That's my goal too. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
You're very welcome.
This is your Pan-African show called Afreeqa with your host Qazalawarq Seifu. Thank you.